All right, man, let's get it, bro.
Let's
This
go. Let's go.
podcast, welcome everybody to our first official episode of Between the Lines podcast with Daniel Martin, myself, and then
I'm
Michael
Michael Fallen.
Fallen. Yes, sir. And so basically, what this podcast will be about is just talking everything Carolina Panthers football, everything going on within the National Football League, and all that good stuff. Um, we're excited. This is our first podcast. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I'm very excited to do this along with my best friend. So
For
I'm
sure, for
pumped, man.
sure. I'm excited as
So
well.
yes, sir. So Michael, if you want to like just introduce yourself and what you do and all that stuff, so just so that the people know who we are and stuff.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this. Like you said, best friend. We've been talking about this for a long time. Episode one of the podcast. My name is Michael Fallen. I'm a local high school football coach. Um, Longtime Panther fan of all things Charlotte. So excited to be here and just talk ball.
Yes, sir. And so to introduce myself, my name is Daniel Martin. I'm a third year college student here at Guilford College in Greensboro. Like Michael, I'm a fan of all things Charlotte sports. And yeah, man, that's pretty much the quick rundown for real. We just like to talk ball, and this is a good way of doing it. And so we're pumped and excited. So let's just get right into it, man. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, man. So first of all, let's talk about the Sunday games prior to the Carolina Panthers game. I have two games listed that I wanted to talk about that really caught my eye, and I feel it caught a lot of people, just fans in general's attention. Was number one was the Ravens versus Bills game.
Oh, for
Did
sure.
you get a chance to watch that?
Oh, for sure. Great showdown on Sunday Night Football. Um, Ravens 15-point lead in the fourth quarter blown. Josh Allen comes back and shows his magic. Very impressed. It was a shootout on Sunday Night Football. Can't get no better week one.
Yeah, man. I feel like that game was just a testament to what we're gonna see in like the playoffs, and as we like later towards in the deep end of the season. But that was a week one game, and you would have thought that was like a playoff atmosphere and stuff
Oh,
like
for
that.
sure. For sure.
And having like one of the top two of the top QBs in the game just to go at it on primetime football is like that was like crazy. That kind of reminisced me of like Patrick Mahomes versus Jared Goff, like Monday Night Football vibes with the high
Oh, for sure.
scoring
For sure. High scoring
and all that.
affair. You can't get no better than that Sunday Night Football. Primetime games are supposed to be reserved for teams who are highly competitive, and those are two teams who are always competing in the playoffs every year. Like you said, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, two of the top quarterbacks in the league. Just don't get better than that. But you got a lot of Ravens fans out there a little upset. Harbaugh has blown some leads in the past. You know, obviously years and years of playoff exits. So we'll see how that pans out the rest of the year. But I think this is definitely a prove it year for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And then just overall, I felt like with Lamar and the Ravens just playing at such a high level through the first three quarters, it was such a shame to just see their defense kind of just take a step down in the fourth quarter when you knew when the Bills just like and Josh Allen just clicked. You could tell that they were like fighting that urgency, and it always seems to happen in these primetime games. And I
For sure.
feel like that's just what makes both of these teams special. But I feel like that was definitely my favorite game from week one, and I
Oh,
feel
for
like
sure.
a lot of other people would agree. Um, and so that's just my opinion on that. But and I don't doubt that these teams would see each other again in the playoffs down the line this year potentially. So I'm excited to see what happens in that. Another game that I wanted to bring up was the Eagles versus the Cowboys.
Yes.
Me and
Oh, for
you,
sure. For sure.
me and you were texting during that game, and like
For sure.
the first text that we were talking about was Jalen Carter. spitting in the face, or not in the face, but in the chest plate of Dak Prescott. Um, and so automatically we were just like clowning the Eagles, man, and just everything like that. But that was that was our first text literally for the NFL season, and so that was
Yeah,
funny.
for
But
sure.
during that, my takeaways from that game was, you obviously had um the loss coming into the game. You obviously knew the loss of Michael Parsons, in a trade with the Green Bay Packers, in exchange to get Kenny Clark in hopes of stopping the run, which was a major focal point in with Dallas' defense and what they were trying to accomplish by bringing in Kenny Clark. And so it was real quick to tell from that game that that was not the case that game. It was obvious um, that Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts was just they were just too much for that Dallas defense, and it really was hard to watch at times because it just constantly felt that Dallas's defense just looked like a middle school defense out there trying to stop the run. And but I feel like that's a lot of how other defenses feel when they go against the Eagles. We had that same experience last year when we played the Eagles in Philly. And it was worse considering with Adriel Evero and his defense,
Yes,
but we'll talk
yes,
we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
for
But
sure, for sure.
um, I feel like if Dallas really wants to be a competitor in the NFC like Jerry Jones says he is, then that front line really needs to have some improvements if anyone wants to take them seriously because we all know what Dallas can do on offense with he didn't really show it on Sunday, but he still had a good game outside of the drops. CD Lamb, I'm confident that those won't be an issue going forward. But it was just during that game, we know what Dallas offense can do when, healthy and everything's at a high level. But can the defense, um, break away and find their potential without Michael Parsons? So we're just gonna see. And the Eagles doing what the Eagles do. So I feel like just those were the two games that I feel like was caught my eye during week one. And if you want to add in,
Yeah, I definitely think that the Cowboys offense really surprised me. They really, obviously losing Jalen Carter up front early in the game before even a down of football was even played. I don't know what that exchange was between him and Dak, but like you said, spitting in the nameplate of somebody before snaps even played is crazy. It's you don't really see that week one in the NFL. Obviously, NFC rivals, Philadelphia, Dallas, they've had their few fair shares of you know matchups with each other. NFC East foes. So, maybe that's tension blowing over from last year, but I think Brian Schottenheimer really impressed me. First game as a head coach. He's offensive coordinator last year. Dak and CD seem to find each other early and often. Like you said, the few drops from CD, I don't think will be a problem going forward. He's a top 10, top 5 receiver in the league when he's on, he's on. You know what I'm saying? Um, he had over 100 yards with the drops. He could have upwards of 200 with them with the catches. So, I don't think that'd be a problem going forward. I think they found I guess you could say, a nice little 1-2 punch in the backfield with Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. I guess Miles. We've had our fair shares of Miles Sanders woes and foes, as you could say, in Carolina. So, we don't. We'll see how that plays out going forward. But Javonte Williams looked like a good running back week one. Obviously you know him very well. You being a Carolina Tar Heel fan, he's a alum from there. So um, I think he'll definitely get his touches this year. I think they want to involve Miles Sanders a lot more, which I think will be good. Miles Sanders is a Super Bowl winning running back. He obviously has had success in Philadelphia. Um, I think he can still have that success. He showed a little success last year. Week 18 in Atlanta. He looked good as our running back Chuba out that week. So I think he can do well, but obviously he's a very inconsistent running back from what we've seen in Carolina the past few years. But we've had our fair share of uh, incomplete offensive lines and not very good protection up front. So we'll see how that goes over the next few weeks. But the offense from Dallas really impressed me. I was really impressed with Brian Schottenheimer. He was offense coordinator. Really a surprise when Jerry Jones hired him, but we've seen surprises for years from Jerry Jones, especially with the Micah Parsons trade to Green Bay, getting back Kenny Clark, 2 first-round picks. Um, we'll see how that plays out. The Dallas defense struggled early and often. Obviously, when you have Jalen Hurts, who gives you that 1-2 punch through the air and on the ground, and you of course have the best running back in the league, in my opinion, Saquon Barkley in the backfield. It's hard to stop that. You have a good offensive line up front. Um, you know, AJ Brown was really non-existent in that game. You didn't really see him get a lot of touches. If that's how that offense looks without AJ Brown getting the ball, imagine with him getting the ball. You could see a back-to-back Super Bowl champions. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
We'll see how that plays out as well. But that game really impressed me. I was really impressed by, Dallas showed fight. Dallas showed impressiveness. But obviously, 200 yards rushing on the ground when Jerry Jones, like you said, focal point in that trade was to stop the run. He didn't stop the run and he didn't get any pressure. You lose a pass rusher, you gain a run defender, but it didn't seem like it showed up at all that week. So we'll see. Obviously they have good corners in the back end with Bland and Diggs. So we'll see how they show up the rest of the year. They obviously shut down AJ Brown. Pass defense looked good, but the run defense was atrocious. So that's definitely going to have to be shored up going forward to see if they can make a little noise in the NFC East this year.
yeah. And as soon as Jalen Carter went out with the ejection or disqualification, I immediately knew that Dallas, you kind of could tell that they were going to be in this game from the jump because after that
For
first
sure.
opening
For
drive,
sure.
they pounded the rock going
You
downhill.
yeah you obviously you lose a run defender and you lose a guy who can also pass rush. Jalen Carter
Yeah,
seemed to be a very good young defensive lineman. Obviously they love the Georgia guys from in Philly, but he's a machine in both the run and pass game. And when you lose that guy, you're having to mix around your defense line first play week one, so it's not easy. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the Eagles go forward. Obviously, like you said, they got Kellen Moore's out of there now. No more Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator. Obviously, Nick Sirianni's a offensive guy, so we'll see how the pass game comes up. You got Dallas Goddard, you got AJ Brown, you got Devontae Smith. You got guys on the outside who can catch the ball, but they didn't show up this week, so we'll see how they do week two.
yeah, man. We'll definitely keep an eye on, especially for the Cowboys, considering
For
we
sure.
played Dallas this season. I don't know what week it was. I forgot.
At home again,
Uh,
though. It's like 3 years in
yeah,
a row. We're at home against the Cowboys at the bank. So it'll be interesting to
yeah,
see. Obviously, no Micah Parsons. He wreaked havoc on our offensive line last year in the bank. So definitely going to be a little different seeing them come to town. But we got our own mistakes to fix first before we get to Dallas.
yeah.
That's for sure.
And I think the last time we played Dallas that wasn't at home was, I'm pretty sure, in the Sam Darnold era. We
Oh,
played
Sam
him.
Darnold.
We
Yes.
uh we played. I think that was the 2021-22 season.
Yes.
So
I know exactly
yeah,
which one you're
so
talking about. Yes.
so we'll see how that goes. But for right now, our focus on this topic on this podcast, Week One, Carolina Panthers versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Um, and so with the Panthers losing 26-10, um, and there's a lot to talk about this game.
For sure.
Obviously, a lot of mixed reactions. It wasn't a fun game to watch. It
Not at
was
all.
you definitely definitely coming into this season, you had better hopes. Ending the season on a high note last year with Bryce looking like potentially looking like a franchise quarterback, and having all the media hype around him. Oh, is he finally turning the page and becoming this quarterback that we saw out of Alabama? And then you draft Tedro and McMillan with in the first round, a very high pick, and you keep your offensive line from last year, which is very rare that you have the same offensive line back to back, in a rebuilding, with a rebuilding team. And then you make some moves on defense. You extend J.C. Horn. You sign Morig. to add to the defensive back room. And then you get Derek Brown back, which, with our run defense last year being the worst, you add him back. Hopefully that adds, some complementary to other folks in the on the D line. Um, but yeah, man, this just wasn't a fun game, and so I'm gonna let you, get your takeaways, what you thought of it, from your, perspective, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, like you said, not a very fun game to watch. Obviously, you come off, last 6 weeks last year. I think Bryce, if I'm not mistaken, 10 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. You thought, man, this team's really turning the page, hoping they could bring the energy into this season. Obviously, preseason didn't show much. They only played a few drives. They didn't play at all the last game. Uh, Brad Idzik calls the plays first three, all three preseason games. We don't have Evero calling the defense, so you kind of wanted to see a little bit of hope, a little slimmer of hope. Showed it a little bit against the Browns in the preseason. Didn't show it all against the Texans, and then of course against the Steelers in the preseason, we didn't play the starters at all. But coming into this game, I thought we had a good chance. I thought it was a struggling Jacksonville team last year, new head coach in Liam Cohen. So I thought, if we can go down to Jacksonville and just prove a point, even just keep it close and keep it competitive, it brings the mojo back to Carolina, back to Charlotte. But obviously, like you said, not impressed at all. Bryce Young, 18 35, 154 yards, a touchdown and 2 interceptions. He looked good on the ground, 5 rushes for 4 yards. Obviously, he broke one down the left sideline. It looked pretty good. Um, Chuba came back this year, ready to go. 16 rushes, 57 yards, 3 receptions, 32 yards, and a touchdown through the air. Made a few guys miss down there and towards the red zone and went and scored. But like you said, T Mac really showed out this week. I was very impressed. We looked going in the draft. Canales wanted the wide receiver one at number 8. He goes out and gets Tedero McMillan from Arizona. Big 6'4" wide receiver can go up and get it. Guy who, obviously coming out, they didn't say he had a good separation. I think we saw that a little bit in the game. He didn't separate a few times, but his catch radius is insane. Obviously he had the one-handed catch that
Yeah.
was a PI, but you know, 5 catches for 68 yards in your debut is very good, very good. He has a good speed to be his size. He's a big, lengthy guy, young, and obviously putting him in that wide receiver room that's also already young. You have one guy over 30, and that's David Moore. Um, you have a very young wide receiver core. Jalen Coker's on IR for the first 4 weeks. They said he should be back right after that. Hunter Renfro's 29 years old. T Mac is young. Um, you know, Xavier Legette. We'll get into that in a minute, but Xavier Legette's in that room. Even the tight ends are young. Tommy Trimble and Jatavian Sanders, very young guys. So it's a young team all across the board. Like you said, you return 5 offensive linemen. You don't ever see that. You know, you get Corbett at center. There was a few miscommunications, I think, between Corbett and Bryce that
Oh, there
um,
was a lot. There was a lot of high
definitely
snaps.
has to be shored up this week. Hopefully, you know, you have a good offensive line coach in there in the building, so hopefully he can shore that up and get that communication down. But communication between the center and the quarterback's huge. If it's not
Yeah.
if it good no good communication, you're not going to get a good playoff, and that showed a few times. Silent count in Jacksonville. Damian Lewis tapped the leg of Corbett, ready to snap, and Bryce is waiting for it and doesn't get it. High snap, bobbles it, and the play's messed up from there. You get in the red zone, 4th and goal to 5. It looked like a little rub route from T Mac that was supposed to go to Xavier Legette. Didn't look like it worked out that way. Throw it in the back of the end zone. That can't happen. You can't go empty in the red zone, especially inside the 10-yard line. Um, Xavier Legette 3 catches, 10 yards. It's not what you want from a first round pick who's supposed to be, this guy that you were awed with last year in the draft. 7 targets and only 3 catches with 10 yards is not at all what it looked like. It looked like even when he was run blocking, he just didn't want to be out there.
Yeah.
If he's not going to want it, you can't have him in the game. You have to find somebody that does want it. If you messed on a pick, I don't want to say it this early. He's only year 2 and week 1, but he had a few mistakes last year that really was like, man, we could have beat the Eagles in Philly off a drop pass.
Yeah.
A lot of drops last year from him. I was hoping to see a big change in him this year, or something that fired us up. But I didn't see it this week. I hope it comes in the next few weeks. Um, as an offense in general, Canales did not impress me at all with the play calls. I wasn't impressed at all. It was very vanilla like. It wasn't anything we saw in Week 18 last year in Atlanta. We saw him throw the ball down the field, play action, misdirection stuff that really like opened your eyes and said, "Wow, okay, this guy can call plays." But
Yeah.
didn't see it Week 1. Only 10 points on the board, and that's not what you want, especially when you showed what you did last 6 weeks last year. Two former Tampa Bay offense coordinators going against each other, Liam Cohn and Dave Canales, and Liam Cohn in his first ever head coaching game definitely outcoached Dave Canales, and
Yep.
that can't happen. Can't be outcoached by a first year head coach and a guy that some people say you were better than as offense coordinator. So hopefully we can shore it up over the next few weeks. Got Arizona on the road this Sunday, so obviously beat them in the bank last year going towards Christmas. Ended their playoff hopes. So hopefully we can go in there and in their undefeated season at they're only 1-0, but if we can go in on the road in Arizona and make a point, I think that'd be good for us.
Yeah, man, you kind of hit, a lot of it on the nail right there. And going back to talking about Coach Canales, one thing that really frustrated me with him this past week was just, you said it, his play calling. He plays too conservative, and that's something that you just can't do when you have an offense that can easily, put points on the board if given the right, play calls and, you're in the right system and stuff. And, he's over here doing these plays that we didn't even like this didn't make sense in like specific situations. Um, and then that's just something that you just can't do, especially against a team that you kind of you kind of even with um, against with Jacksonville, and that's just something that I feel like you just can't do. Especially you're a second year head coach now, you kind of know what to do and all that stuff. But there's just these play calls that I just wasn't really feeling. I feel like we should definitely be more aggressive as an offense. You saw what we could have done when we were aggressive last year. We put almost 50 points on the board against Atlanta last year in the final game, and that was definitely his best game as a play caller. And so I was kind of hoping that he would take that next step into, getting more guys involved and not just run run plays on the first two plays and then hoping you get a first down on the third one. But so that's something I'm looking at, going into this next upcoming game with Arizona. Um, and I feel like, once they look over the film and see their mistakes, hopefully they can, erase whatever they had this past week off the playbook and add some new stuff in. And one thing that I want to see more is I feel like Bryce Young, um, his drop back. I don't know if you noticed, but his dropbacks was not the same at all from last year because he did his same dropbacks in like the same he did in his first year. That slow, like kind of back pedal drop back that you do in like recess. You're playing 7-on-7. When he was, getting it going last year, he emphasized on his drop back, which was much faster. He got the ball out quicker. I did not see that at all this past week. It looked the same as his first year, and I feel like that really costed him because it just didn't feel right. He didn't feel right. That it looks like, and so I'll be keeping an eye on that again this year, this past week or this next week, my fault, to see if that improves. Because the deeper his drop back, the more he sees the field and the less
For sure.
pressure it is because he's so congested,
For sure.
in that line when he drops back so slow. And so that's something I'll be looking out for, um, this upcoming week.
I agree.
Um,
Definitely want to
then
see. Definitely want to see a lot more, like you said, a lot more confidence from Bryce. When he has
yeah,
confidence, he's a different type of player. Obviously, we saw it at Alabama under Nick Saban. Obviously, we've seen it last year, last 6 weeks of the year. He had a different type of swag about him, a different type of confidence. Everything he did was just with confidence. How he walked, on the sidelines, how he talked to players, how he talked in interviews. Everything was just a little more. You could tell he was a little more um, invested in himself. He knew he was that guy. He knew he could make the
Yeah,
plays. He knew he could lead this offense. He knew he could be a franchise guy. So obviously, I want to see that from Bryce. We obviously know he can make plays. We saw it last year. That's not a problem. He can make the plays. He can make the throws. He can make the reads. He can read a defense. It's just you don't want to see him go back to what he did early last year. You don't want to see him, you know, get frustrated like he did against New Orleans week one and just fall apart and kind of like the train go off the track. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to see that.
yeah,
You want to see a guy who has confidence in himself, has confidence in his team. You have the same five offensive linemen up front. You got Moten. Obviously Icky was out this week with appendix was removed. So obviously that's something he can't control. He's going to try to get back this week. You having to get your appendix emergency removed is not something you can control. It's not a football injury. Um, you know, you have, Moten was extended. Moten is regarded as a very top tackle in the league. You got Moten on the right side, Icky on the left. You got a good guard tandem with Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis, and then of course a little shaky week one. And obviously we've talked about this in the off season. You know how I feel about Austin Corbett, and
yeah,
I don't, I'm not saying I don't like the guy. It's just I'm not very impressed with what I've seen in his Panther tenure. Obviously he's a great guy. I've followed him and his wife, good people. Injuries have hurt him in his short tenure with the Panthers, but you see how he played on Sunday. We got to get that short up. If we want Bryce to have confidence, he has to have confidence from the guy who's giving him the snap, and it just didn't look like it was there. Hopefully, this week in practice, Dave Canales, Coach Goodwin, who's the run game coordinator, assistant head coach. Hopefully, they have made it a point that they get on the same page. We have a very good offensive line. I think sometimes last year we were graded top 10 in the league. So if you can have an offensive line who can protect you up front and um, move the big men on the other side, obviously Chuba had over 1,000 yards on the ground last year, so that's something we'd like to see this year. Only 57 yards on the ground this week on 16 carries. Most of the time last year, 16 carries, he'd probably be 80 plus. So, it's the
yeah,
little things. It's the little things. I know it's week one. You have 17 games, 16 more to go. You're not eliminated in week one, but a lot of teams set a tone in week one.
yeah,
So you have to set a tone. You can't fall too behind. You don't want to go 0-3, 0-4, and then try to catch up. That's not what you want to do, especially when you play a division rival, the NFC South rival, in the Falcons week three. You want to have a different type of momentum, different type of mojo about you going into week three. So, big test week two in Arizona. It's got to be a different type of Panthers team on both sides. We'll get into the defense in a minute probably, but it's got to be a different type of mentality, a different type of approach, a different type of game plan on both sides. It's got to be a 180 from what we saw this week. It was obviously a very horrible week, not a good week one. Obviously, other teams had their flaws week one, and they'll probably have to figure that out as well. But when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, we've had years of flaws. It hasn't been
yeah,
a good past few years for us fans. So obviously we want to see a little bit more. We want to see a little glimmer of hope. We want to go into Panther games in the bank this year and have a little bit of energy, a little bit of, okay, we can compete in the NFC South. We can compete in the NFC. We can make a playoff push. If we play like we did last 6 weeks last year, we play like that all year this year, we can most definitely make a playoff push. We can most definitely be competing for an NFC South title. But obviously right now it doesn't look like we're close to that. And, you don't want to see us fall off the tracks. We want to be like a freight train coming out of the tracks, man. Just full steam ahead, attack every day the same way.
yeah. And Canales preaches the mindset of going and just competing and working hard and busting your tail off. But it seems like that come game day, or at least what we saw this past week, just wasn't there. The energy wasn't there. It just felt off. You would
It did
think you would expect something, but that's kind of how the week ones have been in the Bryce Young era so far.
for
Just
sure.
not good.
Not
So
good at all.
hopefully, week two will be better, but we'll talk about that later. Moving on to the struggling defense that
For
is
sure.
coached by Ejiro Evero, a guy that not a lot of Panthers fans enjoy, which is not crazy to say. Just check Panthers Twitter, but
Hey, that's the
it's
truth.
uh, but it's you would think he would stop running, the same stuff and all that because when I was, just watching Trevor Lawrence just feed the ball to Jaguars tight end Strange on like the first couple of drives or whatever, like it was just like clockwork. Like
Yeah,
the
for
defense
sure.
had no answer. And I was like, really? We're letting Strange, get, torch us like that, our linebackers and safety. And there was this crossing route where he just completely um,
Yeah,
was outran our safety, Morig. And so, hopefully, Ivero, when I say hopefully, I mean like pray that
you got to.
Evero,
It's like a must. It's a must for
yeah,
him.
like
That guy's definitely fighting for his job this year.
oh, for sure. And if there's no improvement, or if the defense stays like at the bottom of the league like it was last year, I have no doubt in my mind that he's fired. Because this year, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
like it was like I don't know if there was if anything was said, but there was definitely some concern on if he was gonna stay or whatnot. But we just gotta see what happens. Um, But you never know with this defense.
for
J.C.
sure.
Horn, was a bright spot.
Oh yeah.
He had an incredible interception. He does what he does, and I'm not concerned about J.C. Horn. Um,
It's the other
he's
10 men on the field.
yes, is because we know what he can do. He just got that extension like we talked about, so he's gonna play like a top corner in this league, like we know he is. Um, what I'm just and what I'm concerned and you and most people are is just the run defense.
For
We
sure.
fe- and we saw it a bunch last year to running backs that we feel like you just can't do that. Like we just can't allow that to happen. And it's embarrassing and because teams go out there and they know that they're gonna run this ball on us and we can't do anything about it. And we just can't let that happen. And it sucks as a fan because when it's like you get to these third and short situations, they're just gonna run the ball. We can't do anything about it, and
You're right.
that's something that we have to really emphasize on more stopping the run. Same thing like we talked about with Dallas. That's now just imagine Dallas's defense replaced by Carolina. Imagine if that was Carolina's defense against the Eagles. That would have been that would have been hard to watch, and I feel what Dallas fans were watching on Thursday.
For
So
sure. Yeah, not
that's
a
just
not very impressive this week. Let up 378 total yards. That can't happen. 200 on the ground alone. 200 rushing yards. After most some Jacksonville fans were talking about not even wanting you know, um, Travis Etienne to be back this year, and the guy comes in has 16 rushes for 143 yards. Chuba had the same workload, 16 rushes, and Chuba had 90 less rushing yards than Etienne. And Etienne was a guy they talked about maybe not even wanting a running back this year, and Chuba was talked about as being a top 15 running back with over 1,000 yards. So you know, when you have that big of a separation from two guys who had completely different, rhetorics coming into this year, it just can't happen. You can't let Travis Etienne make you look like the worst run defense to show up in the last 10 years. I mean, 200 rushing yards on the ground alone is it can't happen. You're not going to win games when you let a team put 200 yards on the ground alone. Um, Trevor Lawrence, he had a pretty decent game, 19 for 31, 178 yards passing. He obviously had a touchdown and a pick. Um, obviously the J.C. Horn pick was really impressive. I think we both agree that when J.C. Horn is healthy and he plays like he should, he's a top 10, top 5 corner in the league. I don't think anybody can touch him.
I don't know.
And it showed. Brian Thomas Jr. only had one catch for 11 yards. Um,
No.
J.C. Horn allowed, I think it was a 30 something passer rating this week. He had a few targets, only allowed one catch. So, not many people are going to throw it J.C. Horn's way, but it doesn't matter what you do. You don't have 11 J.C. Horns on the field. You only have one. You have 10 other guys that have to pick up the slack. You go out
Yeah,
this offseason and you pick up a guy from Las Vegas and Trayvon Moehrig. I think he had a decent game. 7 tackles. He was up in the tackle list for us, but that's sad. When your safety's one of the guys getting the most tackles, it just shows that your front line and your linebackers are getting absolutely destroyed.
yeah,
Trevor Wallace was our lowest graded defender this whole week, and that's a guy who was supposed to be our, you know, guy with the green dot. He was supposed to be the guy who's getting the play calls from Israel Rivero. So if he's your um, lowest graded player all week in your defense, that's not what you want from a guy like Trevor Wallace. You have Rose Boom beside him, a guy from LA. I thought Rose Boom looked good. He had 7 tackles. He kind of was a little shaky in the pass game, but in the run game he looked pretty good. Mike Jackson didn't look too bad. He was one that we were, you know, kind of shaky about coming in. Being cornerback too. You got Shaw Smith Wade. He looked pretty good. But Nick Scott, I wasn't really impressed with Nick Scott. If that's the guy you're going to have beside Trevon Moehrig, I'm not really impressed with it. I'd like to see Lathan Ransom, the Ohio State guy, get a little more love. Let him, get some love in the back end. See what he can do. See what he can do. That's a national champion right there. Obviously, that's totally different from the NFL. But if Nick Scott's not going to be the guy, we got to see who is going to be the guy. So if he's hungry, he
yeah.
wants to get in, let him get in and see what he can do. Our pass rush was non-existent, like it's been for years. You have
Nope.
no pressure. You run a 3-4 defense. You're not going to see a lot of pressure. You obviously brought in Turk Wharton from the Chiefs. He's out for now 2 to 4 weeks. So you lose a guy there. You got DJ Wanham returning this year. Um, Obviously we brought in Bobby Brown from the Rams. DB returns. Ashawn Robinson. You let go of a guy like Shy Tuttle. So obviously you want to see those guys. You got to get a little pressure.
Definitely.
Brenton Strange getting a lot of love early on. You got no pressure.
Lost
You
to
got no
Davion
linebacker.
Clowney too.
Lost Jadeveon Clowney, exactly. Um,
Yep.
you bring in 2 young pass rushers in the draft and Princely from Ole Miss, and then of course Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. But they didn't play much at all. You didn't really see them on the
Nope.
field. Obviously, Canales has said that he wants to see them more this week, so hopefully we do see them. Um, the only way to see if they can compete is to put them in a game. You're not going to see them practice. Obviously, practice is a time to get better at little things, but you're not going to see what those 2 guys can do unless you put them in a game. You got to throw them in the fire eventually. Let them learn. They're going to make mistakes just like everybody else on this team. But if you're letting up 378 total yards and it should have been more, um, obviously we got to find something. So if we can get the young guys like Ransom in, Shaw Smith Wade, Princely and Nick, let them guys get in. Let's see what they can do. Let's see if they can make some noise. Let's see if they can bring some energy. They're young, but obviously Ejo Rivera's got to do something. Like you said, he's fighting for his job. It was probably one of the biggest questions in the offseason this year. Was Avero going to keep his job? Would he be the defense coordinator coming this year? Obviously, we felt like the last 6 weeks again. I'm going to keep saying it and reiterating it. After you saw what we did the last 6 weeks on offense, we thought our offense was pretty good. We thought we had a pretty short up offense. We had the 8th pick in the draft. We had plenty of options going in, defense and offense side of the ball, whatever we wanted to pick and choose from. Obviously, we went with T Mac. Um, but your biggest question was your defense. You let up the most points in NFL history. Obviously, we played 17 games, not like a regular 16 game schedule, but still, it wasn't even close. I mean, teams are putting 40 points on us every week. We barely won the Falcons game week 18 because we let them score 40 points on us. So
Exactly.
it's the little things we have to. It's not all on Bryce Young. Obviously he's going to be one that's talked about a lot because All eyes are on him. He's a third year
Yeah,
quarterback, number one pick in the draft. You gave up a lot for him. Um, so obviously a lot of eyes are on him. The target's on his back, but all the blame cannot be on him. You know, he had a similar game, so to say. I wouldn't say really similar, but a similar game to Trevor Lawrence. You know, they only were differentiated by 25 passing yards. They both had a touchdown passing in the air. Both had a pick. Um, you know, Bryce looked good on the ground, but you know he's got to get better. But everybody's got to get better on in all three phases. You know, I was really impressed with Ryan Fitzgerald. I'm going to talk a little special teams. So, you know, obviously impressed with Ryan Fitzgerald, undrafted free agent from Florida State. You know, looked good. You know, made his only field goal attempt from 40 plus. So, um, all three phases have to get better though. It's not just one phase of the game. Offense, defense, and special teams all have to work in unison to win football games, and you see it with teams like the Eagles. You know, all three phases work together and they win Super Bowls. Um, so we have to figure out what the little things are. You got to fix the little things. It's every week something's going to show up, but what are the little things we can work on? Is it our pass coverage? Is it our pass rush? Is it our run defense? Those little things should have been figured out in the offseason. You knew you were fighting for your job as a defense coordinator. You know, you were heavily pursued coming out of Denver. You know, head coaching changed. Sean Payton didn't want to bring him back as a defense coordinator, so obviously he was in high demand, and we actually got him. We was very impressed when we got him. We talked about that when we first got him as a defense coordinator. We were so excited, but that 3-4 defense just ain't working right now. So you got to figure out what it is. I mean, obviously you can't just switch your whole formation up, but can we bring an extra defensive end down? Can we bring an outside linebacker in to bring some pressure? You know, whatever it is to figure out how we can, you know, take the pressure off of Bryce Young, help him out a little bit. When he's having to come in and play from behind all the time, that's not easy at all. You got to figure out how you can help him on defense to better himself on offense, and I hope we see that week 2 in Arizona.
yeah, and I completely agree. And I want to go back to what you said about playing the young guys. One thing that I got from that was you look at a team like the Los Angeles Rams. They built their defense through the draft, and now they're one of the best young defenses in the league, and they just
For sure.
outbattled C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, and the Texans.
Yep.
And that was a game just straight up on defense. And, seeing a team where you play your young guys that you drafted, not just putting them in when you're already down a couple scores late in the
Yep.
fourth.
Put him in early.
And yeah, they got experience now. They got Jared Versay. They got that other D tackle alongside him. They're making plays for the Rams. And then you got Kobe Durant as well making plays. He had a one-handed interception last week as well, and
Yep.
their defense is very fun to watch. And so I feel like if just Canales can put the young guys in, like you said, get Ransom in, get Certain and Princely in, like I promise you, it would not hurt. It would benefit you more instead of just not playing them beside a couple plays here and there. Like so, that's one thing that I hope that Canales can do, sooner rather than later. Um, and so that's really, what I wanted to finish up on the defensive side of the ball. And, moving on, we've already talked about Bryce Young, talked a little bit about Xavier Leggett, but just gonna add on to him is, and I told my other buddy this same thing, and I was like, he just looks clumsy. He doesn't look like a real
Yeah.
wide receiver out there. His route separation is something that I, had concerns about going into this year. There's obviously, clips during the off season where he didn't look sharp. His cuts weren't great. His hands were something that we needed to really, you know, look into. You
For sure.
invest, you traded up to draft him. It wasn't by much, but you still traded up to get him. So that obviously means you like him, you want him to to out there and succeed. But when he's not going out there, when you have the commentator, airing you out on the air during
Yeah.
the game,
That's sad.
saying that you can't block, that if you're not gonna block, get out. Like, why are you even out there? That's like high school level effort right there that he did. And
Yeah.
and you're a big physical wide receiver. That's what you were known for. And then you're going out there and just playing patty cake with them, like he
Yeah,
said. That's just something that you just can't do, and that's something that should get you benched, to be honest. And the fact that we have to say that about Xavier Leggett, about week from a week one game so far, like that just can't happen. There's other guys that will go out there and make that effort. If he makes that block, maybe there's a run there, but that play got blown up, fast because he didn't put a hands on him or anything.
for
And
sure.
so that's just the things that I want to see from him moving forward. You know, this
Definitely,
week one
yeah,
game, that's out.
definitely want to see a little more effort from XL. He came in this year. We obviously have Jalen Coker on IR. I think Jalen Coker outshined him last year as an undrafted free agent out of Holy Cross. He's going to come after week 4. He's going to come back and he's going to be ready to go. He's going to be ready to get work. He's going to be ready to fire on all cylinders. T Mac debut balled out. So either you're going to pick it up or you're going to fall in the depth chart, and you
Yep.
don't want to do that as a year 2 guy. Like you're a first round pick. I know you're the 32nd pick in the first round, but you're a first round pick. You're a guy who has 4 years and a fifth year option. You're only in year 2, and you're talked about dropping in the depth chart. David Moore sometimes last year even outperformed him, and that's not that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen at
Yep.
all, especially when you're a big physical wide receiver out of South Carolina who was speedy, lengthy. You know, they said he created separation well. I don't see it. I just don't see it this year. I didn't see it last year. I saw it a few points, but then when he was open, there was times where you were afraid. You had to you were holding your hand, just hoping he catch the ball. Like you
Yeah.
can't have that out of a wide receiver who at one point, at some points, has been talked about maybe being a wide receiver one. But obviously, I think we found our wide receiver one in T Mac. I think right now he's a surefire guy who Bryce is going to look towards, and I hope he does. T
Yeah.
Mac is hungry. You can hear it in his interviews. You hear it when he talks. He wants the ball. He wants to make plays. He came into Carolina ready to go. Obviously, we've worked with Bryce all off season. Worked with Bryce before he was even drafted. That was something we found out on draft night. He was working with Bryce weeks before the draft. So he wants it. He's hungry for it. He wants it. XL's got to want it. Xavier Leggett's just got to want it a little more. Like you said, the commentators calling you out on national television. You're not blocking. If you can't get it done in the pass game, you have to pick it up in some other area of the game, and that's you got to block. I'm a wide receiver coach in high school level. Obviously I know how it is. You gotta if you're not doing it in one level in one phase of the game, you have to do it in another phase. You have to pick it
Yep.
up. You have to show me you want it. If not, I'm gonna pull you out. So Rob Moore, obviously the wide receiver coach in Carolina, he's got to figure out does he want it, or are we gonna have to put somebody else in? You got Bryson Tremaine, a guy who had a few good catches in preseason. Really showed that he should make the 53 man roster. You got Jimmy Horn, who's a healthy scratch. You know, um, you got Jimmy Horn. You got you got Campbell. I think it's DeLevon Campbell. I think I hope I'm saying that right. The waiver wire pickup we picked up from the Rams, a rookie, big, lengthy, 6'3", 6'4" guy. He was a healthy scratch as well this week. If XL can't pick it up, we're gonna have to figure out who can pick it up. I know those guys are hungry. There's hungry guys in the NFL who want it just a little more than XL does right now. So, he's close to Charlotte, Mullen, South Carolina guy, South Carolina Gamecock. So, um, I'm tired of the feel good stories. I'm tired of the
Yeah.
guys close to home who just get on this team. Obviously we have a few Rico Dowd, J.C. Horn, South Carolina guys. Um, I'm not here just because you went to South Carolina. I'm not for that. We're obviously we say we're 2 state, one team. That's cool. I'm not here for feel good stories. You know what I'm saying? As a fan, I want to see wins. I'm not here to
Yeah.
be like, okay, cool, you're from South Carolina. Let's go. You're with the Carolina Panthers. Jadeveon Clowney last year showed that. South Carolina guy comes home. They were all rowdy about it, and he never showed up. Now he's
Hmm.
struggling to find a team. He don't have a team anymore. So, um, enough of the feel good stories. Panthers Twitter is always talking about all we need to draft stuff. We never drafted a Clemson guy. I don't care where you're from. I want dogs. We found T Mac from Arizona. I
Oh,
want
yep.
guys who want to play for the Carolina Panthers, who want to work. A guy who wants to be here. A guy who wants to get in work every day. Who wants to be better every day. And right now, Xavier Leggett just doesn't show that.
Yep. I completely agree. And you got, he has a nice, little Southern country voice. He
Yeah,
rides cowboys, all that. Like, okay, is if that's the only thing you can bring to the table, then
yeah.
why are you even playing on the field? If
You
you're
go
not
ahead, go
gonna
ahead and just
do,
go ahead and show that stuff
yeah,
on Instagram. Do whatever you got to do, but I want a guy who wants to come in every Sunday and make plays. Obviously, I
yeah,
think it's cool that he gets recognition on Twitter and Instagram about his accent, dollar bill, riding horse. That's cool. Like again, I'm not here for the feel good stories. I'm here for a guy who wants to compete and play for the Carolina Panthers, who wants to be here every Sunday, who wants to be in the Queen City, and who wants to make this team a better team. Like Tedero McMillan is that guy. Hunter Renfro seems to be that guy who wants to work. He's itching. He's itching to be on the field. He's itching to get better every day. He
yeah,
made an NFL comeback. He wants to be here. That's a feel good story guy, I guess you could say, from Clemson, guy from around here. But even just coming in the offseason and making a comeback to the NFL, he wanted it more. You saw him in training camp getting work in, beating
yeah,
up our corners, our DBs. Um, so he's able to guess, got a lot to prove, a lot to prove.
yeah,
Obviously, Jalen Coker's coming back week 5 probably. He's on IR right now. He's out the first 4 weeks minimum. He's going to come in. He's ready to go. He's a baller. We saw that last year. He showed out. Undrafted free agent, good find by Dan Morgan and the crew. Um, don't want to say they found a dud in Xavier Leggett, but right now he hasn't proved to me anything that says he's not.
yep. I completely agree, and hopefully we see some plus effort heading into this week. But after talking everything so far, let's get to our final session or final topic of the podcast today. Preview. Well, actually, no, it's not the last one. But before we head into our last one, let's talk about game picks for this week too. So for just to introduce this, me and Michael are doing game predictions for every game throughout the season, and whoever has the most total wins this year, what's the reward again?
Yeah, better record. Whoever has the worst record has to buy the other one dinner of their choice from any restaurant they choose.
Yeah,
So I started off a little hot, I'd say, week 1, 11-5. You went 8-8, I think. I think you said you
yep,
went 8-8. So um, excited to see how it goes over the next few weeks and all season. We tried to do it last year and we kind of just fell off halfway through. We were kind of upset with the Panthers and kind of just didn't keep up with it. But we're keeping up with it this year. I'm coming in every week ready to make every pick right. I'm not obviously won't be making every pick right, but that's the hope.
can you still see me even though I'm
I
on a
cannot.
different screen?
No.
Oh, I can't. Okay. Uh, okay. Well, let me just. All right. Well, I'm just gonna say the games, and you're just gonna, or do you have the
I do. Yeah,
team
you say
like
the
written
game and
out?
I'll tell you who I'm picking.
All right. So starting off Thursday night football, you have the Washington Commanders going on the road to Green Bay and to face the Michael Parsons Packers. Who you got?
I'm gonna go with Green Bay this game. I think Packers look hungry week 1. Had the Lions all sorts of mumbo jumbo. They weren't in sync on any side of the ball. Obviously losing Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, both coordinators, is tough. But the Packers are hungry and they're a team to look out for this year. I'm obviously the guy I coach under at Walkertown. He's a Packers guy, so he's obviously talking his smack. He's excited. Micah Parsons on that defense, so yeah, I'm gonna go with Green Bay.
Heading into the 1 p.m. slot, Jacksonville versus Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Bengals here. I think Burrow chasing the guys are hungry. The defense looked a little better. It looked a little shaky still, but I'm gonna go with Cincinnati.
Got the LA Rams taking on the Cam Ward-led Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, I think Cam Ward's career is gonna start out 0-2. He's gonna get a little Bryce Young feeling on his back. number one overall quarterback. He's going to lose. Rams are going to win. They're a hungry team, like you said, young defense. And it's going to be a tough one for Cam Ward, especially week 2 of his NFL career.
Got a good old divisional rival game between the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, Dolphins looked, I think, like the worst team in the NFL this past week. Only 8 points. Tua horrible, non-existent offense, non-existent defense. Danny Dimes, I'm a Duke guy, so Daniel Jones showed up and showed out. Good for him.
Surprisingly,
Yes, surprisingly, but I'm gonna go with Drake May and the Patriots.
another AFC East divisional game. The Buffalo Bills taking on the Justin Field Jets.
Fields dueled with the Steelers and he looked pretty good. Thought him and A Rod had a good little battle, but Josh Allen and the Bills are gonna be too much.
Cleveland Browns versus the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, not much to talk about here. Uh, Browns look struggles against the Bengals defense. Yeah, just give me Lamar Jackson.
Interesting matchup here, I think. New York Giants versus the was it Dallas Cowboys? Yeah, Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, that is going to be an interesting matchup. That's going to be know, Giants look struggles against Washington week 1. Obviously, Cowboys dueled with the Eagles on Thursday Night Football. But I'm gonna go with a little bit of upset. Let me get the Giants. Let me get Russell Wilson bouncing back this week. I think he obviously knows Jackson Dart's behind him, waiting to go. But I think Russell Wilson bounces back.
And then a little rivalry here between the with the Chicago Bears taking on the Detroit Lions. You have Ben Johnson playing his former team. I think it's in Detroit. Yeah, it's in Detroit. He's returning, so it should be a fun little matchup. But who you got?
Yeah, obviously, we saw what happened last time Caleb Williams was in Detroit, Thanksgiving Day. Crazy ending. No timeout used on Matty Reflus. Um, both teams lost this week. I think both teams were disappointed in how they lost. JJ McCarthy comes back, leads the Vikings to a win in Soldier Field, and then of course Detroit loses to the Packers. Got beat up on both sides of the ball, but I think it's gonna be a close one, but I think Detroit wins it.
San Francisco taking on the New Orleans Saints on the road.
Yeah, we don't like the Saints around here, Panther fans. So I'm gonna go with San Francisco, but not for the fact that it is a division rival. I just think New Orleans is going to struggle all year. Spencer
Yep.
Rattler, quarterback, I think they're going to be a little strugglers on both sides of the ball. I'm hearing Mac Jones might start for San Francisco this week. Brock Purdy didn't practice today, so um,
Yeah,
might get a little Mac Jones action. Some action. Give me San
some
Francisco.
action, some action like that. Okay, final 1 p.m. game here. Seattle taking on Pittsburgh.
Yeah, A Rod's exciting week 1 is going to slip this week. Give me Darnold and the Seahawks.
And now heading into the 4 p.m. game slot, we got the Denver Broncos, Bo Nix taking on your Daniel Jones led Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, I love Danny Dimes. I'm a Duke guy, so I've seen him play a few times in person down in Durham. Um, you know, uh, rooting for him this year. Obviously, I'm rooting for all the Duke guys, but Bo Nix made a few mistakes week 1. I don't think you'll see that a lot from him this year. Obviously, I was very impressed with him coming out of that draft class at quarterback. Um, Give me Denver to beat Indianapolis.
You have the Super Bowl rematch from last year between the Philadelphia Eagles going on to Arrowhead to take on the 0-1 Kansas City Chiefs, who are coming off a loss to the disappointing loss to the Los Angeles Chargers. This is my game of the week, so I'll
Okay.
definitely be interested in this matchup. So who you got?
Yeah, Super Bowl rematch. Obviously, those are pretty fun to watch. It's going to be my game of the week as well. Um, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey. So it's always a fun matchup. Them two, especially you saw it in the Super Bowl. Philly beat up on them. They just went ballistic. I think Philly's gonna beat up on them again. Give me the Chiefs to go 0-2. That's a little weird, but I'm gonna. It's gonna feel weird to see Patrick Mahomes go 0-2, but give me Philly.
Yeah, and you probably would assume that Philly is gonna make an emphasis on giving AJ Brown more than one target this game.
Oh, for sure, for sure,
So that's something to keep an eye on.
for sure.
Um, you got the Sunday night football game between the Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah. Gonna pull a little WWE here. A Town down, man. Give me JJ McCarthy and the Vikings.
Oh, he pulled that out the bag.
Give me
You know,
JJ
well,
McCarthy and the Vikings.
I like it. Then you got two Monday night football games. You got the first one being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going on the road to face the 0-1 Houston Texans. Yeah, who you got?
Yeah, this is actually a week I have all three NFC South teams losing. I'm not gonna say it's gonna happen every week. Obviously, I don't want to pick them because they're NFC South rivals, but you got to be
Yeah.
realistic. You got to be realistic too, especially when you got food on the line, you got dinner on the line. So, but I'm gonna go with CJ Stroud. He's gonna bounce back. Had a little rocky week one against the Rams, obviously against that young defense, but give me CJ Stroud to bounce back.
And then you got the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders.
Going to be a fun matchup here. Two former college coaches turned NFL coaches. Um, Jim Harbaugh in Los Angeles, and of course Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. Both coming off of week one wins. Both are hungry. Both division rivals. That's gonna be a good prime time, 10 o'clock Eastern time Monday night matchup. You got Geno Smith, you got Justin Herbert. You got two very interesting stories, two very interesting, very good coaches, championship coaches. But give me Herbert and the Chargers.
And then last but not least, Carolina Panthers going on the road to take on the 1-0 Arizona Cardinals. And with this prediction, just also give me, to kill two birds with one stone, um, give me one in-game prediction from this game from the Carolina Panthers and what you expect to from Carolina as a whole in this game and what you hope to see.
Okay, yeah. Obviously, I'm gonna pick us to bounce back and win this week. Um, the fan in me wants to pick us to win every week, but we'll see how it goes as the season goes along. I'm gonna pick us to win this week, bounce back in Arizona, 4:05 Eastern Time game for us. Um, One prediction I'd like to hope this. I kind of ragged on him a little bit, but give me a Xavier Leggett anytime touchdown. Let me see Xavier Leggett to bounce back this week. Maybe a short red zone touchdown, but I like to see Xavier Leggett bounce back, and I think Bryce wants to help him out as well. So give me a Xavier Leggett anytime touchdown. What I want to see from us is just a little more energy, a little more want, a little more um, physicality up front on both sides, better communication, better play calling from Canales, better play calling from Evero. Um, you know, I want to see both sides, not just players but coaches, from the top to the bottom. Even if we lose, I hope we don't, obviously, because I'm a fan. But if we lose, make it competitive. Make it feel like okay,
Yeah.
we have a chance going into week three, home opener against the Falcons. We have a chance to do something. You don't want to go 0-2 and it'd be two embarrassing losses. You want to have um, a little bit of energy about yourself and a little more swag.
Yeah. And so for me, I'm not going to go into too much detail since you kind of already, got everything needed. So I'm just going to kind of like run down, but I will, explain just quickly. So obviously, Commanders, Packers. Let me see what I got. Commanders, Packers. I'm taking the Packers. I think I was very impressed with Jordan Love and what their offense did against the Detroit Lions. So I'm taking the Packers. Um, Jacksonville taking on the Bengals, taking the Jaguars to ride high off the win from last week. I think their offense is gonna be a mismatch against the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And like I said, like I told you, I said that Cincinnati's offense was going to struggle against Browns defense. I thought their defense was very underrated. So I think I'm taking the Jacksonville Jaguars to win. Rams versus Titans. Rams got the Rams. Patriots versus the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are going to go 0-2, taking the Patriots here. Bills versus the Jets, taking the Bills. No reasons explained. Um, Cleveland versus Baltimore. I'm taking Baltimore. Giants versus the Cowboys. I'm taking the Cowboys at home to bounce back from their Week 1 loss. Um, Chicago versus Detroit. I'm actually going to take the Chicago Bears. Um, and for the Detroit Lions to go 0-2. I think Ben Johnson is hungry. Former offensive coordinator from the Lions. I think he's hungry, and I think he's going to bounce back from the disappointing loss on Monday Night Football. So I got the Chicago Bears winning. San Francisco versus the Saints. I'm taking the Niners to win this one on the road. I think just the Saints are going to struggle all year, like you said. Um, I feel like if you're a fan of the Saints and you have Spencer Rattler as your QB, I am sorry for you, and that's just my opinion on that. Seattle versus the Steelers. I think this game's gonna be fun as well to watch. Two good defenses battling out, but I think the Steelers are gonna come and win this game just with overall more with their veteranship up against the young Seahawks defense. um, Broncos versus the Colts. I have the Broncos. Philly versus Kansas City in the Super Bowl rematch. I'm taking Kansas City. It's just hard for me to see KC lose back to back against Philly and then also, lose two straight, to start this year.
Sure.
Even though, a lot of people are riding high on Philly this year, I think KC is going to win this game. It's at Arrowhead, so, you know, America's game of the week, they say, especially since it's on Fox. So I think KC is going to win this one. Atlanta versus Minnesota. I'm taking Minnesota, and it's not something I would say led by a JJ McCarthy led team, but he really impressed me this past Monday, leading that
For sure.
comeback against Chicago. Um, and I think the Falcons. I just don't think they're going to match well against Minnesota's receivers, especially when we got Justin Jefferson on the outside. So I'll be taking Minnesota there. You got Tampa versus the Houston Texans. I'll be taking the Buccaneers to win this game. Um, I just I'm really a fan of the Buccaneers, offense, and that's in me. I've told you this before. We've kind of agreed that anyone, if there's anyone on the division that we least, dislike, it's the Buccaneers.
Oh, for
I'm
sure.
just a I'm just a fan of what they're doing with Baker Mayfield and Emeka Ibuka, who had 2 touchdowns in his rookie debut. I've always been a fan of Emeka, so I always thought he was going to be a stud in this league, and he proved that in Week 1. And I think that continues against, even though it's one of the top defenses in the league in Houston. I think it's going to be a good game on both sides of the ball for them. So I'll be taking Tampa, and then our last prediction is the Chargers versus the Raiders. I'll be taking the Chargers to go 2-0 against the Las Vegas Raiders. And my one prediction from the um, Panthers versus Cardinals game is uh, give me an anytime touchdown from not Xavier, Tedero McMillan,
Okay. I like it.
who I think Canales and Bryce are going to feed him the ball way more. If he got that many targets in his Week 1 game, I think you feed off of that, ride high on that, and I think he gets in the end zone as early as Week 2. So that's definitely my prediction. And then I have the Panthers beating the Arizona Cardinals as well. And one thing that I want to see from this game from Carolina is less conservative play calls. That was my main
Oh, for
focal
sure.
point. Just less conservative play calls. Let's throw the ball more in the air. Get other get a lot of these guys involved. And let's just have a game. Let's just bounce back week 2. Um, so we've had a lot of success against Arizona. Um, I think the last time we played them in Arizona was when we had Cam Newton, if I'm not
It
mistaken.
was. It was Cam Newton, 2.0. Cam Newton
Yeah.
comeback and the famous "I'm back." So
Yep.
hopefully we bounce back this week and
Yep.
make some noise.
Yeah. And then obviously beating them last year at home. So we've had tremendous success against Arizona. So hopefully that continues, this upcoming week. But guys, thank you for sticking with us in our first ever podcast between the lines. With Michael and myself, Daniel. I had a tremendous time, with you doing this episode.
Oh, for sure, me
Um,
too.
and and this episode will be released hopefully this Thursday, tomorrow, as of the making of this recording. But normally, the podcast episodes will be released um, on Mondays, um, and I'm gonna be looking to make a YouTube channel so I could add the episodes on there and on an Instagram page or something along those lines. But we'll talk more about it
Oh, for
after
sure.
this. So, but yeah, man, I had a fun time making this episode. I hope you did too. And if you have any last remarks before we conclude, floor is
Yeah,
all yours.
I had a great time. This has been a dream of ours for a few years now, so it's awesome that we can make it happen. Hopefully, it only gets better and better as the weeks go on, and we learn something new about this podcast thing. But I had a good time, man. I'm excited to just talk sports and Panthers football all year, and we'll see y'all back next week.
Yes, sir. All right, man. We'll see y'all next Monday for our second episode between the lines. That's Michael. I'm Daniel. Peace out, y'all.
Peace.